Greetings again, everyone. We are starting with session 1 of the panel discussions. As you now know, my name is Pamela Mondliwa. I'm the head of research at the Industrial Development Corporation and also the acting head of industry planning, which undertakes the value chain strategies for the IDC. I am thrilled to be moderating the first session that we have this morning, which is titled Regional Integration and Industrial Policy under the AfCFTA. We have 4 brilliant papers that will be presented today, and I'd like to introduce our panelists. First, we'll have Dr. Vuyo Mjimba, who's the Chief Research Specialist at HSRC. We have Michael Weluzani, who's a research consultant at Women Excel Trust. We have Dr. Talk Mude, senior lecturer at the University of Namibia. And we've got Dr. Bongumusa P. Makhoba, who's a senior lecturer at the University of Zululand. Just a rundown of how we're going to run this session. So we're going to have each of the presenters presenting for 10 minutes, one after the other, and then we will have our Q&A session after that. For those that are joining online, you can post your questions in the chat, and Akona will be assisting me with the questions that are coming through the chat. So without further delay, I'd like to Dr. Mjimba to come up to the podium so that he can do his presentation. His paper is on the AfCFTA's developmental, regionalism, and industrial policy in Southern Africa, a turning point for transformative industrial development in a troubled region. Please give him a round of applause.
Good morning. I'll try and be serious for the first time in my life. My paper is not titled that. That's the first thing. I think they got it a mistake. I'm talking about reconciling what I called strange bedfellows. Regional integration on one side and its merits, and the issue of nationalism. That is what I'm talking about, of sovereignty. When we're talking about issues of sovereignty, I think that's what I'm talking about. Where is the problem? The problem is within Africa that got independent. If you start from the beginning, from maybe let's take it to the time of Kwame Nkrumah. We've an independent Africa that is underdeveloped, reliant on primary production, and we know that we're living in a world where industrialization is synonymous to development. That's a challenge. And what we did is that what we needed to do, the policy advice, and I won't go into it, we had a solution. We needed to industrialize Africa so that we can be developed. And when we say we industrialize, it means we're producing, we're selling, but we've got small markets as different countries. It means that we are not competitive. Even now, when you look at compare ourselves to China, we're very small. Now, the solution was that we need to integrate. And this is the journey that takes us to the present-day African Continental Free Trade Area, whose journey I've outlined here. I just started from the Lagos Plan of Action, all the way transforming the Organization of African Union to the AU. We have been talking about how are we going to integrate our economy so that we've got big markets. One of the things that I always ask people is that everybody else in the world sees a market in Africa, but there's one person who doesn't see, one group of people that don't see a market in Africa. It is the Africans. It is definitely what we are trying to do there, because we have said if we industrialize, we'll avoid the resource scarcity, we'll avoid the unfavorable terms of trade of exporting primary commodities. And this is what got us there. So we went there, we want to transform ourselves, we want to form these markets. And one of the things that we're saying is let us start in small groups in regional economic communities. This is what we are saying. So I'm trying to summarize because I thought we had an issue. But when we say let's form these communities to trade, AfCFTA, SADC will trade, ECOWAS will trade, East African communities will form groups that will trade amongst themselves, boost that trade, and then the regions will trade in between themselves. We face these challenges, from poor infrastructure to poor implementation of protocols that we've agreed on. The last speaker, the gentleman from the AfCFTA Secretariat, was talking about all the things that I have there. But the one that we're looking at also I want to look at myself is the issue of nationalism by South Africa, by Zambia, by Zimbabwe, by Namibia, small markets, 2 million people in one country, thinking that they will compete with China, or even Nigeria with 200 million people, China with 1 billion people. It's a no-brainer. I think when I look at it, myself, I don't know about you. Now, when we go there, then I said there are two things. We have the issue where we're proud, proudly South African, proudly Zambian, proudly whatever you are. But there's the issue that we are small as an economy. 60 million people in South Africa, piece of cake for China, not even one town, not one city, and you are competing with them. What are we going to do? We're proud. But does that pride take us anyway? I don't think so. That's my view. I don't know yours. So which one will dominate? So I use the lens of critical reflection, and I'm going to use an issue of the European Airbus Consortium to say, how did this European Union, which these days is a poster boy, not a perfect one, but you know, no poster boy has ever been perfect. In our days, it was Michael Jackson, but he was never perfect. I don't know about now. They're not perfect. So what we're going to say, we're going to use that as an example, something to aspire to better. That's what we can look at. Now, what is this sovereignty thing that we're talking about? Absolute power, that as South Africa, no one can come and tell us what to do. We're proud of it. But when we look at the world, we know there are global value chains, and I do a lot of work in global value chains in the African continent, in the AfCFTA. I've worked with quite a number of people. Sovereignty is no longer an absolute power of a country to determine its own destiny, because it's influenced by other international factors, regional factors. I don't need to talk about the guy with the red tie, so I'll keep quiet on that one. I think we know him. So we go in there. So we now know that sovereignty is a negotiated space. It's fluid. It's not static. And then when you look at this, we look at now, how can we integrate? We've got a plethora of choices that we have. We can integrate that way. But one of the things that I want to do to cut in summary is that even when we integrate, what we need to know is that we need to be flexible. We don't need to give away our sovereignty to integrate. And I will come to the example that I want to go. I hope I'm doing well on time. So I'm already, you can see I'm really trying to rush through it, but more detailed things to do. Now let's talk about the Airbus story. Airbus, we all know Airbus, right? The aeroplane manufacturer in Europe, formed after the Second World War. Europe wanted to assert its authority also in the aviation industry, aerospace industry, because there was dominance from Boeing. And you know, when the Americans dominate, I don't need to tell you what happens. You will see what happens. But Europe said, no, we'll reassert ourselves and we will form a company that competes there. One of the things that I'm going to say is that Airbus, I think the last speaker from the AfCFTA was talking about everything that about what we need to do. One thing that Airbus was, when it started in around 1970, it was a consortium of willing partners. It was not a convoy issue like we do in Africa. Our presidents are ready to sign. Once there's a signature, they are there. But this was a rules-based group. They came and they said, we want to create a business in aerospace industry. It's going to be run on economics. It must make sense, economic sense. And what they did was that they will say to themselves, no one is going to dominate. For instance, in the beginning, you had Germany making the fuselage of a plane, the French making the cockpit and this everything, the British were in charge of the wings, and the Spanish were in charge of the tail. No plane can fly without those. Amongst those components, none is more important than the other. So this is the case where all animals are really equal. There's no animal that is more equal than the other. I think this is a lesson that we learn in Africa. What is it that we can do where we mutually depend on each other? And also the other issue is that what vision do we share? Our speaker spoke about the political will. If you break down the political will into its three components of can, must, and want, is there a must in the African continent? Do our leaders really think that we should develop? I wonder, and I'm talking about the issue of SADC right now. We see what's happening, the wars, election rigging in certain countries. Is there a mass? Is there anything that compels them? What happens is that we need to make sure that we get to a position where we mobilize everybody. We say, let us have a common vision. We buy into it. But one of the things that needs to happen is that it must be a club of the willing. It must be a club of the willing. And it must be backed by political, that is what I'm talking about, political will. And there must be industrial discipline. Airbus had industrial discipline. They had to compete with Boeing. They had to compete with Douglas, what's the other one? Douglas McDonald. They had to compete. One of the most important things that they also had a supranational legal structure. Where our legal structure in SADC, where our legal structures in the AU, are they enforceable in specific issues? And the other thing that I want to say is that Europe did not come with a blanket way. Airbus is an example. Let's form a common interest around an issue. We've got agriculture. You've got, he spoke about the issue of pharmaceuticals, and I'm lucky that I'm working on those from the AfCFTA work of you. We had a seminar a few weeks ago on that. I mean, we outsource our issues. Right now, the biggest threat we have is non-communicable disease. Let me tell you what's going to happen. Europe is not going to care about our strokes. It's not communicable. We can't infect them. They care about the communicable because they want to keep them away from us. Our health, our pharmaceuticals. We're importing 70% of our pharmaceuticals, up to 90 in certain countries. Get your stroke, America will not care. Sorry to scare you. So, what do we want as SADC? What we're looking for, we want to say, can we pull our, let's look at sectoral collaboration. Agriculture is one of those in the paper that I described. Let us look at that. I'm sorry if you are following my paper. I change my mind more than a certain group of people does change his mind when I'm writing. 2 days afterwards, I'll be done. I'm gone. And then the other issue that I want to talk about is, let's reimagine the sovereignty that we're defending in Africa or in the SADC region and say to ourselves, is it real or is it a fantasy? Is it a fallacy? Is it something that we feel good about but doesn't pay us? This calls for us to be really pragmatic. We really have to be honest with ourselves. One of the only proverbs I've ever formed in my life that I've said is that one of the ugliest things to look at in this world is reality. If you're in a mess, look at yourself in the mirror in the morning and say, I'm in a mess. Do I want to remain in a mess? It's a different thing. And I do mentor students, I tell them, there is nothing wrong with being wrong, but there is everything wrong with remaining wrong. So we cannot remain in this protected sovereignty that we love so much. So this is what we need to do. We need to share our developmental goals. We need to come up with supranational industrial policies that focus us on particular industry. He spoke of agro-processing, he spoke of pharmaceuticals. There are many others that we are looking at that we can do. Our mineral wealth. I mean, it's sad to see that what we get, if you do the value chain of the mineral wealth and try and go in, it's sad what we get. I'm finishing soon. The chair wants to kick me. She has a black belt in karate. So these are some of the issues that I suggest at the end of my paper, that we need to have a supranational enforcement capabilities to enforce this issue in the regions. Without that, we're a convoy club, signing, and we will sign. We need industrial policy forums. We need to institutionalize some of this coordination. It must be there. We also need incentives. We need to deploy funds to companies. The government is there. I agree with you. I'm a fan of industrial policy. Think of Ronald Reagan in putting industrial policy to protect Chrysler and Harley Davidson. Crazy things. And then also what I'm saying is that we need to pilot a few projects so that we can correct our wrongs. It is never going to look like what Europe has done. My final slide is that I would like to say Airbus is not a strategic, it's not this best possible. But if we can know that sovereignty is not an absolute, and we can negotiate it amongst its all flexibility, we can make sure that integration, regional integration, and sovereignty are not strange bedfellows. We can maintain our sovereignty just like the British have maintained the Britishness, rule Britannia on the wings of Airbus. The Germans are ruling the fuselage. The French are still staying on the cockpit with the electronics, and the Spanish are still concentrating on the tail, and Airbus is flying. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mjimba. You raised a very important point around how we can ensure that the regional value chains provide win-win solutions, which means that we must think beyond any one country thinking they'll produce everything, but seeing how we can share the fruits of then the regional integration. And I think the proposals that you make around how we might achieve this are quite important, and we'll come back to them in the discussion later. I'd like to invite Dr. Talk Mude up to the stage, and he'll be presenting a paper on the AfCFTA, developmental, regionalism, and industrial policy in Southern Africa, turning point for transformation, industrial development, and a troubled region. Now I see where the challenge was with the first speaker's title. Apologies. Please come up, Dr. Mude.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation. My presentation is on the AfCFTA, developmental regionalism, and the industrial development in Southern Africa. The AfCFTA was developed or was adopted to create a single market for goods and services towards deepening economic integration and intra-African trade. But the question that arises is what has Southern Africa done jointly to adopt an industrial policy that that accommodates or that harnesses the opportunities presented by the AfCFTA. The AfCFTA, according to studies that have been conducted, creates one of the largest markets in the world after the World Trade Organization. The market of about 1.4 or approximately 1.4 billion people. That presents an opportunity for the continent, given that Southern Africa, or Africa in general, participates in the global economy as a supplier of raw materials. So that's basically peripheral participation in the global economy. But the continent is rich in natural resources, land. Southern Africa, minerals, fertile land, favorable climatic conditions. But what is the region doing to maximize all these opportunities towards participating in the global economy as an equal partner? We are importing water bottles. We are importing plastic cups from China. We are importing textile products from China. We've been told that our people travel all the way to China to purchase textile products for resale, to purchase plastic water bottles, purchase some of the basic things that can be manufactured in the region. So the argument that I'm advancing in this paper, which is still under development, is that a lot needs to be done in Southern Africa to take advantage of the opportunities in terms of developmental regionalism that are presented by the AfCFTA. The approach within the AfCFTA transcends trade integration. It incorporates cooperation in terms of infrastructure development, cooperation in terms of industrial development, as articulated in Article 3 of the agreement establishing the AfCFTA. But there are some challenges that are bedeviling the region. And these challenges ought to be addressed if the region is to rise to the occasion in terms of harnessing the opportunities that are presented by the AfCFTA to jointly come up with an industrial policy that addresses some of the issues that I've raised. So one of the problems, or one of the challenges, the troubles bedeviling the region is trade deficit. Poor trade performance in Southern Africa. I've spoken about issues of importation. We are importing more than we're exporting. And what we are actually importing are some of the things that can be manufactured or that can be developed within the region. We talk of food imports, meat imports from the USA, from the European Union. We talk of importation of textile products and many other things. And we are exporting raw materials. Why are we not processing them and manufacturing what should be manufactured within the region? One of the objectives of the AfCFTA is to promote diversification. And the question that arises is what has been done and what is being done in Southern Africa to promote diversification. There is need for Southern African countries to come up with a common policy, industrial policy, in terms towards diversification. For instance, we say these countries focus on agro-processing, and these countries focus on textile products. These ones focus on energy products and so forth. And such a policy should also be grounded in ring fencing local industries. Now, that brings us to the issue of ownership of the AfCFTA. Do we own this thing? Who is funding the AfCFTA? Of course, African governments are funding it, but we have funding from the European Commission, funding from Germany, funding from Switzerland, many other European countries. So, if we are taking funding from these neoliberal countries, are we going to successfully ring fence our local industries? This fund is going to permit the ring fencing of local industries. That is a critical question that needs to be answered. So that's basically one of the problems affecting Southern Africa. If the region is to come up with a common industrial policy, foreign intervention is bound to interfere with such a policy. The funders, the foreign funders, are bound to come in and influence some of the decisions, and that is problematic. Another challenge in Southern Africa pertains to governance, peace, and security. Of course, the AfCFTA offers a lot of opportunities in terms of trade integration, in terms of economic integration, and in terms of developmental regionalism. But there are problems, governance problems, governance of natural resources, political governance. Democratic governance on the continent leaves a lot to be desired. Democratic satisfaction among citizens in Southern Africa leaves a lot to be desired. Conflicts in countries such as DRC, one of the richest countries in the region, in terms of natural resources, in terms of land, but we have a challenge in conflicts. So that also needs to be addressed, because trade thrives in a peaceful environment. Industrial development thrives in a peaceful environment. And the current state of governance, peace, and security in Southern Africa is problematic. And that needs to be addressed. If these countries in Southern Africa are to adopt a common industrial policy, that policy will also go a long way in making sure that peace and security, good governance are promoted through collective efforts. Another challenge in Southern Africa pertains to GDP. The annual percentage change in GDP in Southern Africa also leaves a lot to be desired. Majority of countries in Southern Africa are recording negative annual percentage change in terms of GDP. But like I've indicated before, the region is very rich. So what is the problem? The AfCFTA came at the right time. Trade commenced in 2001. At a time, the region, the continent, and the whole world were recovering, and are still recovering from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. So basically, the argument adopted in this paper is that the AfCFTA offers a lot of opportunities through developmental regionalism in terms of trade integration and to boost development on the continent and also in Southern Africa. But there are challenges that ought to be addressed. The region ought to adopt a common industrial policy that is driven by trade integration. And of course, there are a lot of challenges that needs to be addressed first. And these challenges can actually be solved if the region comes up with a common agenda, a common policy, and work together towards economic development. Thank you. That marks the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much. And I'm also appreciative to the speakers for keeping to the time. It looks like we'll be able to finish the session on time and allow an opportunity for discussion after all the presentations. So I'd like to call Michael back on. We've got your correct presentation now up. He'll be presenting on enhancing regional value chains under AfCFTA, the case of COMESA's industrial growth.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. This study explores the role of African Continental Free Trade Area, that is in enhancing regional value chains within the common market for Eastern and Southern Africa, that is COMESA. And the specific target for this study in the COMESA region, I chose Kenya, Uganda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. And I had to make use of the qualitative research methodology. And the insights were gathered from industry leaders and the policymakers, that is to identify both the challenges and the opportunities in fostering cohesive value chains. And some of the findings of this study include that despite the considerable potential of African Continental Free Trade Area, there are some significant obstacles. Financing options for small and medium enterprises, that SMEs. So maybe just a recap on the key terms, that is after African Continental Free Trade Area. This is a trade agreement that is aimed at creating a single market for goods and services across Africa. And of course, through reducing tariffs, trade tariffs, and standardizing trade regulations among member states that suits their countries. Then on regional value chains, these are network of production and trade that span multiple countries where different stages of production are carried out in competitiveness and efficiency. Then I will need to go to the key findings of my research. The first thing that I found was that there is a need for strengthening infrastructure and the logistics. This is because that in Africa, we tend maybe to get to take some of the things that are being done in European countries, but the findings are reviewing that there is need for the Africans to make sure that they strengthen their infrastructure and logistics. Why? Because this is a critical thing in facilitating trade. These infrastructure include the creation of good roads, railways, port facilities that can significantly reduce costs and transit times. Because we can see sometimes maybe there are issues at the border post, maybe the roads are not good. Maybe you want to transport something from Zambia, go to Zimbabwe, or maybe from Kenya to Zambia. If the transport mechanisms are not good, then it also affects the issue of trade and industrialization. Also, there's need to enhance networks, logistics networks that can also improve access to markets for small and medium size enterprises. There's need for the African governments to make sure that they also recognize the SMEs, because maybe that is where trade starts. Trade doesn't start at the top, but we need to make sure that we recognize those small traders. The next finding was that there is need to promote technology, transfer, and innovation. On this one, as Africans, we need to know and believe that we are moving from the indigenous way of doing trade. So there is need for innovation. We need to adopt some policies that are very innovative in terms of trade. So we need to encourage partnerships between local industries and foreign firms that can facilitate technology transfers and innovation. And of course, this can be achieved through initiatives that can support research, development, training programs, collaboration with universities and other research institutions. And also another finding was that there is need to access to funding and financial services. There is a pressing need to increase access to funding for business engaged in regional value chains, establishing specialized financial institutions and funding mechanisms such as venture capital funds of trade financing programs that can empower local industries to invest technology, capacity building, and market expansion. So we are saying that there is need for certain institutions that can make sure that they support whichever industry is running in a certain country, and of course, to finance different programs that can empower the local industries and of course the local content. Then on the recommendations that I made through this research, number one, there is need to strengthen enhance transportation and logistics infrastructure. And on that one, we are saying who should do that? And of course, we have national governments and regional authorities. They should make sure that they institute such policies. And on action, they should focus on modernizing transport system, such as roadways, rail transport, and border posts, that is to lower costs and ensure the smooth moving of goods across all borders, and also to facilitate timely delivery and trade efficiency. Another recommendation is to facilitate and maybe to sponsor the small and medium enterprises. And on that one again, we are saying the national governments should dedicate themselves and finance these small and medium enterprises. And they should develop initiatives like credit facilities to facilitate those small traders. Another one, another recommendation is to standardize regulations and compliance. Since this is mainly focused on the COMESA region, the recommendation is saying they should create a collaborative platform for dialogue among member states to unify regulatory standards and simplify compliance, reducing administrative hurdles and enabling more inefficient trade regulations. Then the other recommendation is on mobilizing resources, that is through stakeholder engagement. National and regional governments, international donors, and the private sectors should embark on that journey. And on the action, they should cultivate partnerships to secure funding for infrastructure projects, that is enhancing regional integration and driving industrial growth through collaborative efforts. Yeah, I think that was my presentation. And I will end by saying that the future of trade as Africans, the future of trade and industrialization lies in our capacity, and there's nothing that can be done for Africans without Africans. And we should have the African remedies for the African problems. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. I think the proposals put forward on the ways that we can achieve this integration that we're looking for are certainly helpful and will be important in the discussion that we have later on. I'd like to welcome our last presentation by Bongumusa Makhoba. He will be presenting on AfCFTA as a catalyst for intra-African trade, development and industrialization, the role of South Africa.
Thank you so much, Program Director. Good morning, everyone. My name is Bongumusa Prince Makhoba from University of Zululand. I'm presenting a paper that I'm working on here that says African Continental Free Trade Area as a catalyst for intra-African trade, development, and industrialization. What is the role of South Africa? So basically what we are trying to do here, we are trying to identify some opportunities and implications that comes along with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. We try to apply conventional economic theories and then make use of econometric model and data set to estimate a gravity model that analyzes, which is an international trade theory that analyzes trade relations between trading countries. So as we all know, that the African Continental Free Trade Area, established in 2021 primarily, it focused on strengthening the regional and economic integration between African countries, aiming at boosting intra-African trade, promoting supply chain and market access that fosters economic development in the region. Now, Africa with 54 countries and over 1.4 billion people or population, it remains one of the largest regions in the entire world. And the region is also, we all know that the region is heavily endowed with critical natural resources, mineral resources, and raw materials that from time to time are normally exported to advanced economies. The work of Bush 2007 discovered that South Africa boasts with incredible array of critical natural resources, with 88% of diamonds found in Africa, 42% of gold reserves, and 42% of world bauxite, 38% of uranium, and 10% of confirmed oil reserves, all found in the African region. Now, the work of Hayden and Whooper in 1998 noted that South Africa alone produces the value of about 88% of the world platinum, making the country one of the largest producer or a leading producer of the platinum in the entire world. While the African continent holds the total of 82% of chromium, 54% of cobalt, and 52% of the world manganese reserves. So, as I've said previously, this paper seeks to apply some conventional economic theories. So we're looking at the mentalist theory of international trade. We're also looking at using the gravity model framework, to analyze intra-African trade and its benefit, and also to see if the African continent is actually conforming to the principles of these conventional economic theories. So, and as an econometric model that analyzes, that helps us to empirically analyze the relationship between the variables that we have identified as informed by the theoretical framework that we have identified. We are adopting a vector autoregressive model to estimate the relationship between the variables that we will have identified. Now, we have identified these two critical economic international trade theories. As I mentioned previously, the mercantilist theory that specifies that the worth of the nation and the power of any nation lies or is directly influenced by its gold reserves, as well as silver reserves, and also taking into account other critical natural resources. So this theory remains one of the oldest international trade theories, and its key principles suggest that each and every nation should be focusing on maximizing its export and minimizing its import in attempt to achieve a very favorable trade balance of that nation. So now it's up to us as economists to analyze it and see if our own African economies, do they conform to the principles of these fundamental or conventional economic theories. Now, the second one that I have identified is the gravity model by Jantin Degen. So this theory was formulated in 1962. So basically, the theory described trade patterns or trade bilateral relations as the relationship that says the trade between two trading nations or between two trading countries is as a proportional of the GDP size of the two countries that are trading. In this case, we are denoting these two countries as country I and country J, and inversely proportional to the distance, meaning that the larger the distance between the countries that are trading, that diminishes the trade between the two countries. So in these studies, we'll be using the reference to South Africa, but employing the data set from the sub-Saharan African countries that we have extracted from the World Development Indicators. So this model proceeds to give us or to specify a theoretical model. So that says trade is a function of GDP size of the of the two trading nations, of the two trading countries. In this case, as I've said, we'll be looking at the GDP of South Africa as well as the GDP of sub-Saharan African economies combined. So that will be denoted by YI and YT in the study. And then that is negatively affected by the distance. So that simply means that as the distance widens, or as the gap between the two countries that are trading widens, then we expect the trade relations to diminish. So that equation one is basically the logarithm expression of the gravity model. And then in equation two, the gravity model suggests that we can also add or incorporate other variables that influences international trade. For instance, we can incorporate the impact of regional free trade agreement. So in this study, we will be incorporating the impact of African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and then we'll be using a dummy variable to incorporate that. So in that equation, which is equation 2, that is denoted by Xij. And then we've looked at some literature review, and then we've discovered that there's quite a very limited studies that have been conducted on intra-trade across different regions in the world that have employed different models and obviously arriving at different results. So due to time, I'm going to try to move very quickly. And then what I'm also trying to look at as part of conceptual literature, I'm also looking at what is it that we see or that has been found in literature as some of the key commodities and resources that are found in the African region. Okay, so from the first slide, you will have seen that that slide clearly indicates that the African region actually remains the powerhouse of critical minerals in the entire world. And then if we look at those critical minerals or critical natural resources, I have highlighted some few here that are very critical. The first one, I've looked at the crude oil and natural gas. So we have a significant deposit of this resource, of these natural resources. And significant deposits are found in those countries, Nigeria, Angola, Algeria, Libya, and Egypt. And then we also have gold and diamond that are found in South Africa as the leading gold producer, followed by Ghana, Mali, Burkina Faso, Sudan, and Tanzania. And then we still have more that are very significant in the global market, such as cobalt, such as copper and lithium. And all of those are found in the countries that you can see there in my slide. We also have manganese. We also have uranium. All of these remain critical minerals that we produce and export as raw minerals in advanced economies. We also have a significant agricultural contribution or production that we export also as raw materials to other countries. For instance, we have cocoa, we have coffee, we have cotton, we have tea, and all of these, we remain the leading producers of these commodities in Africa. And what we do from time to time, we will normally export all of these critical resources or critical raw materials to advanced economies to come back to or to be exported to our own countries at a much higher value or at a value added final product. So for instance, the production of cocoa, we are saying that Ivory Coast and Ghana are the largest producer of cocoa. but we always find ourselves enjoying Swiss chocolate that are produced using the cocoa that is exported from Ghana and from Ivory Coast. Same thing with coffee, same thing with tea. You even find green tea or English tea that will have exported from Kenya, for instance, but coming from England or from UK. So all of these critical resources are important, but we are, to a certain extent, not taking a full advantage or using the full opportunities that we have in attempt to actually ensure that we localize and promote the local refining and processing of these products into a value-added final product that will have a higher value and contribute to the growing of our economies. So what is it that we can learn from other regions in the world? For instance, what is it that we can learn from European Union or Asian intra-trade? So for instance, we know that the intra-European trade, for instance, over the past 2-3 decades, it has enlarged to a total of 27 European countries, where it actually has been very successful in promoting free movement of goods and services, free movement of capital and people within the region. I mean, we have heard that from various speakers who have came here in the podium before me. So their intra-trade over the past few years, or for instance, in 2024, it has accounted to more than 61%. And then if you also look at what Asians have been doing, Asia remains the second largest or most integrated, economically integrated region in the world after Asia. After Europe. So in this case, Asia intra-trade accounts for about 57%. Whereas when you come to intra-African trade, you will see that disappointingly, intra-African trade remains at 15%. And as much as we can see the growth that, a slight growth that we have seen from 2022, that was at 13.6%, and then just last year improving to 15%, but still, that is still very low compared to other bigger regions that we should be looking at or learning from in the entire world. And then we have also incorporated, we have also incorporated some political ideologies that I'm going to skip now because of time. And then we have also tried to look at the long-lasting solutions for African economies. We are saying that we should be looking at boosting intra-African trade, looking at the opportunities of common monetary area between African economies, making full or effective use of pan-African payment systems, looking at localization and refinement of our own natural resources, as well as strengthening the African development banks. But also importantly, what has been said before by previous speakers, focusing on the regional integration and development of key sectors, such as improving our investment in infrastructure, technology, and integrated financial systems. And then let me quickly go to my result. So this is what we have estimated. Remember what we said we are going to estimate an augmented gravity model. So we've estimated the VAR model based on the augmented gravity model. So if you look at the first row there, the response of trade of intra-African trade as a result of an increase in GDP is positive. So that is in line with what the gravity model is suggesting to us. And then if you look at the response of intra-African trade due to a positive shock in sub-Saharan economy or into the sub-Saharan GDP growth is also positive, even though that positive response is modest. And then interestingly, if you look at the response of intra-trade as a result of the distance, so now the distance, what I should have mentioned, the distance we measure it as a proxy of transportation cost. So we are assuming that if transportation cost increases between sub-Saharan countries, that actually translates to a wider distance between the trading countries within the region. And then lastly, the response of trade due to the introduction of African Continental Free Trade Agreement is positive, and that response is sustained for a very long period. And then I'm not going to present so these are the robust model for analysis. So in conclusion, what we are saying that African economy should focus on fostering regional economic integration with a balanced, sustainable economic growth and intra-African trade between African countries. So the focus should be on industrialization and reform policies that focuses on local processing, manufacturing, and refining of natural resources into value-added finished product, and boosting intra-African trade to capacitate on or to capitalize on African regional market. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the only way that Africa at large can achieve greater heights through intra-African trade. I thank you.
Thank you very much for that very interesting presentation. We're now moving on to the Q&A session of the panel. We have about 15 minutes, so I don't even want to waste time by giving my reflections, but to take first a round of questions from the floor, and then we've got a few comments that we won't read out from the online, but we will read out the question that has been posed. So if you can please raise your hand if you have a question, and the person with the roving mic, we've got people with the roving mics that can bring the mic to the people. So are there any questions to the speakers on the papers that have been presented? So we'll do the first round with the 4 questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Rendani here. Mine is less of a question, it's more of a comment, and so briefly I'll go into it. I think one almost get a sense that there's an assumption that the market is available. Like, just because we've set up the free trade area, these things are available and they're going to happen. I think when listening to the presentation, you almost get a sense, just because we produce X, we can do value add and we're covered. But I think the reality is these things are a lot more complex than that. And I think in the presentation, one didn't quite get a sense of the appreciation of those nuances and the difficulties that we need to go through in terms of getting this right. And I think perhaps if one could, I mean, as the conference goes further, one could deepen in some of those discussions around, you know, what are the bottlenecks in these various value chains that we intend to participate in, and where are the opportunities? Because I mean, not everything is available currently. So I think that's my comment, and it will be great to hear the perspective from the speakers on, you know, how to engage from that lens. Thank you.
My question is for Michael. So Michael, you spoke about COMESA and regional integration. So I just wanted to understand from your research, how effective has COMESA been in driving regional integration, particularly in terms of food security? Because the countries you mentioned, Kenya, Uganda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, they do face significant food security challenges. So I just want to get a sense of how COMESA has played a role in dealing with those issues and also in driving regional integration? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Elvis Avignon from the South African Research and Industrial Development. Quickly to talk and also in extension to Vuyo. The developmental regionalism framework by Faisal and Davis and others have emphasized the different pillars that are required for us to take advantage of the AfCFTA. And in these sort of documents, though they remain quite conceptual, but also prescriptive, they do emphasize the challenges and opportunities, and also sort of recommended the need for common industrial policies. So when you were presenting, I was wondering what new are we adding here? What are the key things that we are recommending, particularly in this case, to push forward the reality of us achieving particularly the alignment of the national policies to some of these common policies. Of course, we also know the SADC region also already has its own common industrial policy, right? So what should we be doing beyond these sort of superficial recommendations? And the station to Vuyo, actually, your Airbus case is quite intriguing. But we do know the Airbus stories, or the Airbus bus has already passed, right? We do not have opportunities in developing Airbus right now on the continent, because of course, regional value chains, etc. We can talk about it, about the capabilities that are required for that. My question to you is, what new emerging sectors are coming up? So that what emerging sectors are coming up that could allow us to take advantage of some of these sectoral opportunities, particularly when we think about the sort of the green transition, but also some of the regional value chain issues that are emerging. Thanks.
Good morning. I'm Michael Ndiwalana from the Atlantis Special Economic Zone. So my question centers a lot about, we speak a lot about regional integration, but what does that look like in implementation? So I'll make an example. We manufacture green tech components. So all the wind turbines that are used in South Africa come from one of our tenants. We have South African companies who are looking to advance the manufacturing of battery energy systems. However, we know that the cells in themselves predominantly come from China. However, the likes of Congo and Zimbabwe have lithium, and there's the OR Tambo SEZ, which is looking to manufacture cells. And then we have the companies who are looking to manufacture batteries. However, we are not necessarily sure about what mechanisms, protocols, or specific details in the African free trade area will allow SEZs to drive regional integration.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sinclair, and the question that I have speaks to more around trade facilitation and policy. I think the panelists shared in depth in terms of some of the sectors that they're working in, but I'm fascinated to find out what are some of the institutions and organizations pushing towards facilitation and policy mechanisms for inter-African trade. I'm just curious from an institutional standpoint and some of the organizations and how they interact. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think with those questions, we can do a round of answers from the presenters. And I do recognize that some of the questions aren't directly speaking to the work that's in the papers that have been done, but please weigh in where you can. So perhaps we can start with the questions that were directed at specific papers, and then we can follow up with the questions that were general. So Michael, could you take Vuyo's question on how effective COMESA has been in delivering in terms of priorities such as food security?
Okay, thank you so much. In response to that question, I think in as much as there are still some gaps in terms of COMESA's contribution to food security in some of the countries within the region, I think there are some strides that can be seen on the improvement of food security. If we can check on the food security in terms of intra-COMESA trade, since 2020, there's an increase of 15% of agriculture in countries like Zimbabwe and Uganda. Also, outside food security, I think there is also an increase in solar energy initiatives in terms of trade and industrialization, and there's an increase of 20% in Kenya and 25% in Uganda. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think this question is important, for instance, in the context of climate change. So we saw in the last, now I can't remember if it was El Nino or La Nina cycle, where Kenya experienced a drought and they were not able to source basic food products that they required. And what ended up happening is the countries around them put blocked exports or put, extreme prices, which meant that in Kenya, food prices rose astronomically in that period. So how do we start thinking about solving these problems at a regional level? Because we do know that in sub-Saharan Africa, the temperatures are going to be rising at least 2 degrees above the global average. So these are key things that regional value chains need to be dealing with. Then, Dr. Mude, would you take Alvis's question on what are the new things that can be done to achieve the alignment between, the regional, the regional or continental aspirations, as well as at the national level? There should be a mic there.
Thank you. That's an interesting question. And to answer that question, I'll make reference to the aspects on the implementation of the AfCFTA. The implementation is partly grounded in the adoption of national implementation frameworks by individual countries. Some countries have done that. Some are still trying to come up with their policies with the help of the African Union Commission, the World Bank, UNECA, and other organizations. But my paper is grounded in adoption of a regional implementation framework, one that is grounded in industrial development. This is against the background that the AfCFTA endeavors to promote industrial development through diversification and the building of regional value chains as articulated in Article 3G of the agreement of the AfCFTA. So what I'm saying is Southern African countries collectively ought to come up with a regional implementation framework that is grounded in industrial policy for the region, one that aligns with the AfCFTA. Of course, there's a general framework on industrial development in Southern Africa. But what about one that is based on the AfCFTA? Because as we have been told from studies that have been conducted, the AfCFTA offers opportunities for catalyzing industrial development, diversification, building regional value chains, and other aspects of trade integration. So with the opportunities that are presented in terms of regional, developmental regionalism, cooperation on issues that go beyond trade, issues of infrastructure development. We have challenges in Southern Africa pertaining to infrastructure development, for example, delays at border posts, roads, road networks linking Southern African countries. There are some challenges. Our railway lines, they are not being maintained, and a lot more challenges, issues of tracing cargo, facilitating cross-border trade, and so forth. So basically, it is all about the region, apart from national policies, apart from other aspects of implementing the AfCFTA nationally. So arguing that there is need to facilitate an industrial development policy within the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Dr. Mjimba, there was a question around what are the other opportunities that you're seeing in the region from a sectoral perspective?
Just allow me some time. I need to respond to a couple of things. Yes, what are the opportunities? I think we spoke in the beginning. I brought the Airbus story as an example, a learning point. As somebody who has this experience both working practically in the private sector, an example is you pick what you want to use. Not the Airbus. Africa does not need an aeroplane now. It needs food. Dr. Makhoba spoke about food, and I spoke about food. Our regional value chain is strong in food. Agriculture. We are fed. We are suffering because there's war in Ukraine with all this arable land. And the question is, we have got all those policies, prescripts that have been said. Most of us go to church or to the mosque, we read the same Quran or the Bible every week. It never changes. So here we are with all the prescripts that we know. But for me, I identify our strong sense of nationalism, which we hide and say we are sovereign. It is what prevents us from adopting those prescripts that you said have been said. Opportunity one, food. Opportunity two, I think I said it, health. And I gave an example that with infectious diseases, Europe will help us. They helped us a lot with AIDS because they didn't want us to export it to them. I'm serious here, I'm being pragmatic. Your stroke is your stroke. Done the study, I've got the policy brief, and I'm still doing it. Hopefully you'll give us money, the begging period. We even know the extent of NCDs in Africa. We have a youth population that is increasingly urbanizing, changing its diet, medical doctors and pharmaceutical firms. And are they getting ready? I'm just talking about two here. Infrastructure that will assist us trade. Is it adequate? It's not. So the opportunities are there. So my issue is, the Airbus story is they were pragmatic about their nationalism. The British, if you look at Airbus, the engines come from Rolls-Royce and all others that are there in them. It remains, Rolls-Royce has remained British. The proud Royal Britannia on Rolls-Royce aeroplane. On the cockpit, it's still French. Nationalism, pragmatic nationalism is what we need. And he spoke about political will. If you break political will theoretically in its all components, which are the can we do it? Yeah. Where do we want to do it? If you talk about nationalism, things like state capture, there is no people that will come and say, let's break down this nationalistic approach from wherever country you come from if I'm going to lose. So local interests, political interests by the elite are fighting that. So the good laws that we are talking about, national interests are fighting them. So we need to preach against this blind sovereignty that says, I am proudly Zambian or whatever nationality you are. We have a must. I'm talking about political will here. I can rig elections, I don't have to. Whether you want it as country A or country B, if I can rig elections in my country, I don't have to conform to all the protocols that we say SADC you do. I don't have to. So we need to break down that, what I call unnecessary sovereign. I think Dr. Makhoba will talk about this, or you'll know about this. We have been talking by Africa, not by Zambia, not by South Africa. How do we pragmatize that? How do we do it? Then there's a question, somebody asked the question to say, we're assuming there's the market, but China sees a market in us. Selling their medical pharmaceuticals here, their pharmaceuticals here. How did India go in there? Why are we not seeing a market? It's a different market. I do value chain mapping. The value chain mapping of steel is different from that of automotive. For those steel goes into, it's a different value chain. Again, what we need to understand is, even if you look at the value chains of, which is some that I've done a lot, of the mineral sector, backward linkages. I'll tell you this for free. In many mines, isolated mines, catering firms in those mines that cook for people and not from Africa. So Dexo from France. So as a company of millionaires for cooking our pap in a mine. These are backward linkages. Mill balls, where are they coming from? Mill bits, where are they coming from? All of us see a piece of gold this big is 2 million. We think I am the 2 million. What is the cost that went for me to produce this gold? Who is hammering these? Then without a single operating mine is integrated into African mining value chains. Because we all want to sell this gold, we forgot we need to explore to find the gold. We need to construct a mine. We need to keep the mine going. There's little things like greasing machines and everything.
Thank you.
Thank you. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is, let's think differently. Let's remember that we say it over and over because we're preaching, because we have not changed. The day we change, we'll stop preaching, we'll move to something else. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Makhoba, I wanted to then ask, so there are a few general questions that have been posed, and would you take Cynthia's question around what are the institutions and organizations that are important in order for us to be able to deliver on this? And I think that question links also to the question around how can SEZs tap into the tap into all the progress and work that is being made in order to unlock all of this potential that we're talking about.
Okay, thank you so much for that question. It's a very good one. To the best of my knowledge, I know that the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is the project or the flagship project of the African Union, Vision 2063. If I'm not mistaken. So when we look at the institution that will be overseeing or heading that project to its full implementation in ensuring that we all enjoy the benefits of this project, the African Union should be at the forefront of ensuring that we fully benefit from this project. But also importantly, I think I want to touch to the comments that was raised by one of the speakers at the back on the bottlenecks that we have, as well as the opportunities that comes with the African Continental Free Trade area. So yes, we do have some setbacks, or the bottlenecks, and they are quite substantial. But with the right political will from our leaders, from our different states within the region, we can overcome them. All of us here who have presented, we have highlighted that we have challenges in infrastructure, for instance. So we need to invest in infrastructure that links all African economies for these single markets that we are preaching. We need to invest in technological advancement. It's a critical space that we need to invest to, so that we are able to say we want to promote localization, we want to industrialize, we want to process and refine our own key natural resources. And then lastly, we have in many African countries, we have a problem of previous commitment of African countries to the former colonizers. So this is a topic that many people don't want to touch, but we have a problem of some commitment where you find that many countries, we've seen that we've seen some developments in, especially in the West Africa, where we've seen that some European countries still control, things like the economy, the printing of the currency, or the printing of the reserves of the central banks and so forth. So all of those are the critical bottlenecks that we need to deal with them together. I liked the first speaker from the Secretariat of the African Continental Free Trade area, who said, we need to be united. We can't push individually. If we try that, we're not going to win. So we are all saying that we must be united. We must be trying to foster relations that will say we are speaking as one voice as Africa, because we can never succeed if we are trying to do our own thing in our own corners in Africa. We must be a united Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Makhoba. There were a few other questions, but because we are running, we actually passed the time that we were supposed to do the session. We won't cover them, and perhaps I might try to capture them in the wrap up. So we've had 4 papers and quite a number of common themes across them, but all alignment around the potential that exists and some of the interventions that are required to be able to deliver on this. We had a paper that identified some sectoral priorities, and a few of the papers covered some of the cross-cutting issues in terms of the enabling environment that is set up. From then, the political economy dynamics, trying to align 54 countries around an industrial policy is going to come with some difficulties. One of the papers spoke, I think, made reference to or a comparison to the EU. So the EU at that supranational level has budget, and you cede your sovereignty to the EU, but you also benefit in terms of grants and other initiatives that are driven down by the EU. So from our perspective, that's something that is a consideration at an African level, but what are the complexities that are brought forward by the budgets that are actually available at the country level? Because we are not performing as well as some of the European countries are, but they also started somewhere. They didn't start where they are. So how do we start thinking about these things? Then in terms of the priorities that have been identified, we're fully aware of the value chain inefficiencies. So there was talk about a one-stop border post. This is a program that was agreed many, many years ago. I now can't remember the exact year. And I think we built a few and then stopped. How do we bring these to the fore? So how do we make it faster to move, just an example, not necessarily the case, product from South Africa to Tanzania faster than it coming from India to Tanzania by boat? So we need to be able to move the products that can't be delayed at the border. The customs clearance needs to be aligned. But also we need to engage and grapple with the questions of the capabilities that are required. One of the online questions was, how fast are we moving, for instance, in the area of critical minerals? And we can see already that some of the developed and developing countries, but non-African countries. So China is striking deals with some of the African countries. The United States is striking deals with some of the African countries. But we at an African level are talking about potential regional strategies for critical minerals. So the window is closing on us being able to actually create integrated regional value chains from the critical minerals opportunities. But how do we, again, solving the issue around the sovereignty, how do we prioritize the region rather than, at an individual country level where they might be coming in, but it's for a short term and won't run. And this means we need to deal with the issues around, so at a political level, presidents are in place for 5 years, but these are investments and decisions that are going to take years to be able to deliver. So the fruits of the decisions and the work that are being taken in this tenure may only be realized later on. So how do we manage those types of issues as well that would support successful implementation of all of this? I think with that, we will close the session. I'd like to thank the speakers for the papers and the participants for the engaging questions. After the session, there is a tea break that you can just, I think there'll be tea in the open area just outside the auditorium. Please give the speakers a round of applause. Thank you.